Wednesday. Welcome to the Ravit Show. I'm super excited. As you know, I'm wearing a Trino t-shirt. So no guesses. We'll have Dain Sundstrom, co-creator of Presto and Trino, CTO at Starburst on the Ravit Show today. We'll be discussing about data engineering, the journey of Dain, and the past, present, and future of Trino. So feel free to let us know, and you can have all the questions coming in the chat here. Let me know if we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube. I'll just quickly check. There are no hiccups. I don't think there are any hiccups. So it's amazing. I can see Trino, hashtag Trino coming in. So yeah, the story behind the hashtag Trino today is Starburst team and Trino team has been kind enough to offer bunny, which I guess even Dain doesn't have till now. So it's like a brand new bunny, which you can actually get if you type in hashtag Trino in the chat. Let me quickly give you a sneak peek of this very cool bunny as well. I have it somewhere that I've opened it for you guys. So this is the bunny. It's so cool, right? I might actually participate myself too to get in here and put in a hashtag Trino in the chat. So that's about obviously the giveaway that's happening. But a little about Dain. Dain Sundstrom is a former Facebook engineer and one of the original creators of Presto, co-creators. Dain remains a founder and contributor of the open source project Trino, formerly Presto SQL. Dain is the CTO and co-founder at Starburst, working in research and development for Starburst Labs, and leads engineering efforts around Starburst Galaxy, a SaaS Trino offering. His hobbies are coding, playing video games, and watching sci-fi movies. So feel free to have those questions coming in. It will be super amazing, even if you have like the questions coming about sci-fi movies. Let's see how, obviously engineers tackle it, and from Dain's perspective, that would be super cool. I can see a few comments coming in. Manisha typing in Trino, Aditi, Trino. George, yeah, super excited to have Dain here today with us, and he's done a lot for the community. So let's not make him wait, and let's have him here. Hey, Dain, welcome to the Ravit Show. How are you?
Doing great. How are you doing today?
I am very well. I was just telling about the giveaway, which is a very cool bunny plush, and I know you don't have it. So
I know.
yeah, audience kind of have like so much in there today. They just need to do type hashtag Trino. But then for our audience, can you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Dain Sundstrom. I'm one of the original founders of Presto. When we started at Facebook, there were four of us: myself, Martine, Traverso, David Phillips, and Eric Wong, all of which who are now at Starburst. I'm so glad we got our gang back together. It was great.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been working on open source since like 2000, when I worked on what was called EJBOSS back then, which is now JBoss. So way back in those days, worked at Apache on a bunch of stuff. I love working on open source. I was so happy when at Facebook we started this project, and we were able to get the thing to be open source from the very beginning. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And a great journey that we have seen for Trino. And obviously, I've closely followed you since the time you were at Facebook and doing a lot of things there, creating obviously Presto. And obviously, want to learn more about your early days at Facebook. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So at Facebook, we started on this project actually pretty soon after we joined Facebook. It was like right before Facebook went public. So they actually weren't a very big company, and there were still like huge areas that like just needed people to work on them. And we knew the VP of Eng of Facebook because he was the VP of Eng at a very small startup that Martine and I and David all worked at a long time ago. And they wanted us to work on building a version, a query engine for their massive data warehouse, which at the time was 300 petabytes. This was like 10 years ago. So you can only imagine how big it is now.
Exactly.
And there had been a system that someone had written a hackathon. It wasn't great. And then the people had left, but someone had shown like, hey, you can run really fast queries over data lake data if you know what you're doing and you're careful. And so we started on the project to build a new version of this. And Martine and David were very good at language and doing language processing. I've never been particularly great at it. I mean, I built like a version of the EJB container managed persistence query language, but like it was hard for me. These guys just like, I mean, SQL's an insanely hard language. So they handled that. I did a lot of the distributed computing stuff along with Eric Wong. David actually, we basically had to reverse engineer Hive to pull this off, because Hive doesn't really have a spec. It just is. So you have to just see what it's doing and then rebuild it and make sure you don't mess anything up. And it's a very, very hard system to work with. So we built out our first version and launched it to production like 6 months later. And like couldn't even really do joins, could do aggregations, but we added joins and some other stuff very quickly afterwards. And then it just took off like a rocket at Facebook. We open sourced it shortly after, took off throughout the Valley, and some around the world, because Facebook has a pretty big name. So,
yeah, I think amazing. The problems that you've solved, obviously, at Facebook are, for a fact, where if I go back to years, you have solved such amazing problems and still doing that. But what were the key problems that you identified early in the stage, and you felt, okay, these are the main problems that we need to solve at Facebook? What do you think?
Yeah, so Facebook had a number of issues. Like, first of all, it had this really big data warehouse and lots of users. And so being able to build a system that can, there were problems like you had tables that had, 100,000 partitions in them. And literally, if you load them into memory, you'd run out of memory because Hive objects are huge. And so, how do we actually build a system that could stream through data? Also, Facebook has lots of siloed data sets. So there's the main warehouse. There's a data set that has all of the data for your news feed and who's interacting with it and that sort of thing. There's data sets for there's huge MySQL installation, like thousands and thousands of MySQLs, and all of these have different data sets. And one of the things we wanted to do was be able to pull those different data sets into the engine. So when we originally built the thing, our original vision was like, we were going to build something that actually basically is what Snowflake ended up building. So we started at almost the same time as Snowflake, and they went very much the direction of a kind of Teradata style traditional SQL data warehouse where you import all your data. And we went the design of like, no, we're just going to work with data lakes and the standards that are out there. And so we started with that design. And then as we were like, the worst part about having that design is actually importing data. It's still terrible if anyone is using one of those systems. So we built a system into Trino to like pull data in. And then we found out like we wrote a version that was good enough. We could literally just query live. And we switched our design at that point to not import data and just query live out of the data stores. And the real reason for that is, okay, Facebook's got, this is, 10 years ago. So it's like 2012, has 300 petabytes of data. And you're like, great, I want to run interactive queries to make a second copy of my 300 petabyte data warehouse. Like, no, that's never going to happen. Like, even if we wanted to, you literally couldn't buy enough hard drives to do that. Like, there are only so many hard drives available for sale in the world.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. I think definitely amazing, obviously very important problems that you've solved at Facebook. Also, interesting insights that you're sharing, Dain. So let's take a few questions from the audience here as well. I can see one very cool question coming here from George. George is asking, what's your favorite technology stack for data engineering? Interesting.
So as a person who works on a SQL query engine, I actually don't do a lot of data engineering, but when I do it, I use Trino, and this is because most of my data is already in a data lake format. So we have systems that'll like import data from like a Kafka feed and land it in Parquet files and stuff like that. And then once I have data in any format that I can read with Trino, I'm using Trino for everything else. So if I want to transform the data, I'll just run create table as statements or create views. And I do everything with Trino because I know it really well, and it's a very complete query engine. Like the language is really complete thanks to like to all the people who work on the language side, which again is not me.
But yeah, makes sense. Definitely superb. Also, you've literally seen the evolution of this space. Can you share like what are the major things that have changed in the data space from back then, in Facebook to now? Obviously, in terms of the size, the data size, yes, definitely it has changed a lot. But in general, what are the things that you've kind of seen changing a lot?
Yeah. So back in like 2012, running a data warehouse was super insanely difficult. It's gotten better. I think we at Starburst have done a really great job of like making it simple to launch a data warehouse. But back then it was like you would set up HDFS, you'd set up a meta store, you'd have to set up the database for the back end of it, you'd have to set up like Hive, you'd have to set up like there's dozens of systems, and anyone who's installed like Cloudera or Hortonworks back then knows how complicated it was. It was like you had like a smorgasbord of like options you'd have to choose from, be like, oh, add this, add that, and cross your fingers, make sure it works. And then you're like, oh, I need to hook this up to my security system. So like you'd spend months getting it working. Since then, I think there's been a lot of like really nice innovations around this. So really big enhancements. Well, I'll talk about the recent ones. The things that I am super excited about recently are things like Iceberg, because I mentioned like Hive is this undocumented system where like you have files, they're in a directory, and there's an assumption about how they lay out, and there's some hints in the meta store about how they work, but different file formats have different rules, and they're not written down. And Iceberg wrote a document on exactly how everything works, wrote a really clean piece of code that allows you to read data in their format. But they also went through and fixed tons of problems that you have in Hive. Like you can add and remove columns without breaking all your existing data, which, by the way, if you don't know, you really can't do in Hive. It's weird. And so like that's a thing I'm super excited about. I actually really love things like Glue because you can have a meta store without having to set one up and maintain, which is really difficult. We built a meta store into our product, and some others have in theirs also, just because running one of those is really difficult. Security's gotten a lot better lately. There was no OAuth really 10 years ago that people were using in enterprises, and it's gotten a lot better. So like it's easier to have a data lake set up in a cloud, be able to run queries against it, secure it, get your policies right. That 10 years ago would have been impossible. Even doing it yourself today is pretty difficult, but they're great SaaS vendors you can just use.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, there was an interesting comment coming here from Suzanne. She is the classification guru, obviously the fixer of dirty data. She says, get a quote on those rules, and that I know for a fact she talks a lot around quote is like the consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy for data, and that is amazing. Thanks for that, Susan.
Yep.
Definitely, wearing a coat does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Also, Dain, I know for a fact we have like a few more questions. Let's take one question from the audience here, and that's from Aditi. How did you come up with the name Trino? Interesting.
So we had to change our name at some point.
Yeah.
It was not an option. You can read all about it in our blog post. But anyone who's ever tried to come up with a name for anything knows how super hard it is. So we had so many names. There's actually a list somewhere of all of the names, and most of them are really bad. It's actually hilarious. And we were like, I don't know, 2 days before we had to come up with a new name, and Martine and I and David were on a Zoom call, and we were throwing around, we're like elementary particles. We were like neutrino, which we really liked. We thought it had a great sound to it. But there's like other things called neutrino, like you can find them. And Martine was like, well, let's just shorten it to Trino. And that was it. That was literally it. Like just inspiration. And we looked and there's nothing called it. Like we could pick up the domains for nothing because it's not even a real word. Whereas like, even if you find something you like, you're like, that's great. And then someone's like, I'll take $20,000 for the domain.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's like, that's crazy. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is good backstory. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Dain. Also, since we are on this topic, just to let our audience know that we are giving away one cool bunny, and this is the bunny that you'll be getting if you type in hashtag Trino in the chat. We already have a few entries coming in, and we'll be doing a very cool raffle towards the end of the show, which will actually announce the winner today itself. So stay tuned, ask questions to Dain. I know there are a few questions which I'll definitely be taking after this one. Also, Dain, I know for a fact there's a summit which is happening next month on May 5th. And sorry, what's the summit name? I know it's around Trino something.
Cinco de Trino, because it's the 5th of May.
Trino. Amazing. Yeah. So it's like the half-day summit, right? Happening on the May 5th, 2022. I can't wait to obviously join in, and I'm sure there are we can win very cool swag like this from Trino there, and can't wait to hear all the guests and the speakers at Trino Summit. Looking forward to that.
I'll be giving a lab on using the Starburst SaaS version of Trino, so we'll set you up. Everyone will walk through, create an account, and run some queries and stuff like that. So.
Wow, that is super cool. Amazing. Yeah. All right. Also, that takes me to a very important question, and I wanted to deep dive, and I'm sure the audience today are excited about that too. Can you also tell us more about like the early days when it was called Presto and now Trino, obviously, but how did it start with you and your co-creators, like which was like the first point? Okay, now it's getting real.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, like we built this out in the initial versions took us like 6 months. Actually, we wrote a version that took us 3 months, and it was absolutely terrible. And we threw it all away and then started over again and wrote another one. So lesson there, if anyone's doing anything, is when you go to write something like a database, a lot of the academic papers are they don't work when you try and implement them at scale. That was a lesson we learned very much the hard way as we tried to like work on some of these papers, and you're like, oh, there's design flaws in here, they deadlock at scale. And we once we got it working, and like it was pretty much it was one of those things where it's like there was nothing else like it at the time, so it was like very, very successful. There were no competitors really in our space, and it took off really quickly at Facebook, and then like people at Facebook, they leave and go to other startups all the time in the Valley. So it just spread through the Valley really fast because people would be like, hey, like, you don't have to wait, 3 hours for your Hive query to come back. You can use Trino and like do it in a minute or two.
Nice.
Which is literally like, those were the kind of, this is 2012. Like Hive was really, 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 really slow. It's gotten better. It's still not close to like what you can do with an MPP engine. The community grew pretty quickly, and like the actual really stunning moment for us was after we left Facebook, we decided we were going to set up a new open source organization to manage the project, and we started just talking to everyone. Like that's what we did for like the first year after we left. Was we just worked on the community, and we started talking to all of the people who are using it. So we talked to the big companies in the Valley, but then we started just talking to like everyone in the community, and we found there were just like these huge communities in like Israel. There was a company that set up a conference in Israel. We flew out there, and the building was packed. There were like people standing outside, watching on TVs, and we're just like, how is it? Like, Israel's not a huge country, and there were like hundreds and hundreds of people at this conference, and you're like, what? And then we started like, all these businesses came up like, oh yeah, we use this for all this stuff. And then we had the same experience in Japan and India and, all different places. Like we're like, oh, this is a technology that's really popular in the West, the US, and like mostly California. And it was like, you look at the Google data and you're like, only like a quarter of the traffic comes from the US, and like, it's very spread out. It's super popular in finance. And we're just like, we had no idea.
Right. And I think it's like a self-realization too, when you kind of, you actually get on the grounds and in the field, you kind of see what's actually happening and what change you've got through what you've created. But sitting in obviously offices, you don't feel what has actually changed. But once you're kind of at these conferences, events, meetups, you kind of realize that how big it has become, and that gives you more confidence as well. But talking about, obviously open source community and communities. So how was it back then in, when you started off, and then moving towards, and now how far has it grown? What's like the total number, if you have like any number that you're aware of?
That is a great question. I actually don't have the numbers.
Okay. But still, what's the moment there in terms of like the shift?
Yeah. So so at Facebook, like we mostly worked with other Valley companies and people who had heard about us. We actually hadn't done a lot of like direct community building. After we left, we spent a very long time doing just pure community building, like working on what the community wanted, getting people involved, building up the better documentation base, building up our Slack community. And now we have this very, very active Slack community. Like if you go on it, there's people there all the time asking questions. In the community, there's lots of beginners showing up like every day, like showing up and we have a special channel just for beginner questions, because beginners typically ask the same questions over and over again. So it doesn't frustrate some of the other users that are more advanced. Like it's perfectly fine to ask like similar questions. Like that's so like we work a lot with the community on building out a much better experience for everyone, and it's really paid off. Like the amount of people involved, the numbers just like took a hockey stick once we started doing this. And I love it because like my background is open source. We just didn't have the time for it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of, when you are kind of around the community and that there are so many people using it and they're kind of, getting the value out of it, that kind of makes it, more, you kind of get the motivation there and you kind of
Yeah.
feel more, it's like the happy side where you have the community, you can go about, you can get the right feedback into how to make it better if there are any issues that are coming up. So it's always great there. Also,
I mean, we
yeah.
also the at Facebook, like Facebook only uses certain parts of the engine, and
Mm,
so like the best part about like working with the community is like having, frankly, motivation and time to go like work on a bunch of the other things. Like, Facebook uses like a couple of connectors. They use exactly one security system, exactly one authentication system, one authorization system, both of which are like totally custom. And so like being able to like completely build out the stack, adding, really advanced stuff like update, because like Facebook doesn't do updates, all their data is right once. And so there's all these like, not only like, motivation for the community of like I get to work on this stuff that like people really like, that's super nice, but also there's like really fun stuff to work on that like we would have never gotten to, like updates.
yeah, I think that's super helpful and amazing for the community as well. Also, I think, Dane, there's, the bunny is super much in demand. I can see Kate talking about it, and then Kate says she needs that bunny just behind you, and Suzanne is like she wants it. I
Yeah.
think
Oh,
it's all over the place. So I definitely, and just
yeah.
for our audience, the bunny that we're talking about is the giveaway today. You just need to type in hashtag Trino and you will enter the raffle. I'll actually announce the winner towards the end of the show. I'll
So
obviously need to, yeah.
the bunny's name is Commander Bun Bun,
Oh, Amanda Bun Bunny.
which
And that's what, yeah, question from Kate is what's the story behind the space bunny?
yeah, so we have this most amazing designer that like when we launched our new website, she like helped us build the whole website style, as a volunteer. And she drew, if I could get the mirror effect right, she drew the bunny as we were like trying to come up with, we were doing rebranding. And so, like, if you actually look at what we were doing in Presto, it was like this very kind of traditional, stodgy database
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And we're like, okay, well, we have to make a new brand. Let's go the opposite way. Let's have like a nice cartoon feel. Let's like,
Right.
this is more about having a nice open community. Let's try and take the seriousness off of database. Let's go pink and purple and like
Wow.
cartoony. And so that was kind of like what we talked about. And she came up with like all the styling and everything for it, which is like super awesome. And then the when we got the name, we're like, well, what are we going to call the bunny? And I was like, oh, it's got to be Newt, because then it'd be Newt Trino. And Martine was like, no, we can't pick. Like the community has to pick. So we ran a contest to pick, and one of our community members' daughter came up with the name. She's like, oh, obviously it has to be Commander Bun Bun,
Wow.
and that name, she was like, there was some tie between like 3 or 4 like kind of boring names. That name went into the contest and was like 70% of the votes. It was like
Oh,
obvious. The minute you hear it, you're just like, yeah. So
this is amazing. And Suzanne has to say, can Commander Bonbon be my friend? I think it's all over demand. Obviously, I need to reach out to Jez and the complete marketing team to just let them know that you need to have like the bunnies out there for our data community and for this space, definitely. And yeah, Kate, I'm wearing I was lucky enough to get a bunny t-shirt, so I'm very happy about it. And Dain has another one. I like that color too. So yeah, and great. A big shout out to Alison Loney. Just posted about that for this amazing rebranding design. So great stuff. Also, I know for a fact where like obviously I want to like shift gears here a bit in terms of after you leaving Facebook and you started your uh, own thing, Presto Software Foundation, in January 2019. So how was that? The transition from leaving Facebook and then starting over altogether, a new thing.
So it wasn't as hard as like, I mean, I've been in open source for a while, and like starting a new thing, like it can be difficult. It wasn't super difficult because we had the experience, but we had always built a community around developers. Like I am a very strong believer that open source should be run by the actual people that write code, which is a little bit there's different models for open source. Like some models are like the corporations run the show because they employ the people that write the code. I'm a developer, so I'm always like, no, people write code, not corporations. Now, just a different style. So we had always built a developer centric community. So like, when people earn commit, they're earning, or maintainer status in our community now. So when they earn that as an individual. If they go to a new company, we trust that person. This isn't about who they work for. So as we transitioned away from what Facebook was doing, we just contacted the developers, and most of the developers followed us. The community knew where the developers were going because they were pretty clear about it. And so the community followed the developers. And then very, very quickly, the actual development rate inside of the open source project actually took off. And a lot of that was just due to like, we had more free time to work on stuff. We weren't working on internal stuff. And the excitement around launching stuff new brought a lot of new people into the community. Did I lose you? Hello?
All right, I am live here. Let's see. Then I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
And I'm on mobile. I'm just trying to connect the right time for the technical issue, but yeah, we're good here as well. So yeah, you would. I'm sorry, where I left you is when you were talking about the Presto Foundation 2019.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So what I was saying was that as we set it up, the majority of the community, actually, I think the whole community followed. There were a few companies that decided to put their own thing together using the Presto brand, which was unfortunate. but the large majority of the other people followed, and that actually, since we left and we started working more on community stuff, other people joined in, and it was like this, virtuous cycle, as more and more stuff got built faster and faster. So if you actually look at the development rate, there's actually a line at when it was split off, and like the curves actually turn, which is like, the community has been just amazing. There's so many awesome people that come in and like do tons of work. There's lots of commercial providers. There's really big companies that are involved, that are running their own custom internal extensions, or a lot of times they're just running normal stuff. So it's really fun. Like I love working on it, like all the time I can.
Exactly. And I know for a fact where, obviously when all the engineers out there and, are kind of getting the right traction, it does make a lot of sense. And that also brings me to another question, obviously, for a fact where we know that the goodwill of the community doesn't matter, like matters more than the names. But for our audience, what made you change the name from Presto to Trino, and why Trino as a name? We know that how you decided Trino, but just maybe we can just focus on why you changed the name, basically.
So when we started the Presto project back in the day, I had worked on a bunch of open source projects, and I mean, actually, when the project started, Martine and David and I got together, and we're like, building a database takes minimum 10 years to like get into like it being really good. We're at 10 years, it's really good. And I'm not about to put 10 years of work into like something that would be internal inside of a company and just die at some point. I've worked on projects where you do a bunch of work and then like the company direction changes and it's just gone. So we went and talked to the executives, and we're like, we want to do this. We're going to do it as Apache license. And they were like, great. We want to disrupt the database space, the analytic database space. At the time, I had a bunch of experience with JBoss, and had seen what happens when one member of the community kind of takes over a name. So we had actually originally built the Presto project such that if you actually go back and look, there was never trademarks on any of the names. It was supposedly used. It was used by like everyone in the community. It was supposed to be like general kind of property. So when we left, we kept using it. Unfortunately, Facebook decided to trademark the name after, and we were eventually forced to change. And like looking back, we should have changed the name. Actually, we should have changed the name the day we split. The reality is we spent like 2 years building up the name, and then like we had to change the name, and we could have spent that 2 years building up the new name. And like it would have been a lot easier at the time. Like it was more work. Nowadays, I mean, I think it's been like just a year and a few months. And like literally when people mention Presto somewhere, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That used to be our name. But I kind of live in the Trino bubble. So it's just like, I hear that it's actually fairly popular out in the world, that people still talk about Presto, but it's like, I personally, like, I'm so used to the Trino name by now, and Commander Bun Bun's awesome.
Yeah. So. Definitely, I think Commander Bun Bun is the is the commander leading Trino, and which is amazing. Also, we have like a super interesting question coming here from Kate. Can you tell us the difference between data warehouse, data lake, data fabric, data web, and data mesh? So there's a lot of buzzwords here, and very interesting question, Kate. I'm eager to learn more about this as well.
So these are a lot of marketing terms that also have some overlap. So data warehouses historically been used to refer to the traditional data warehousing that is like pretty much everything before like 2005. So this is your Teradata, your Netezza, your Aster, your DB2 Analytic, and they're typically back in those days you would get like a rack of servers full of hard drives, and it would have database software on that set of servers, and you would just import your data into it. So it's like a really, really big Oracle installation running on a bunch of machines, or MySQL or Postgres, depending on whatever you use. But it was a database engine designed for analytic queries as opposed to transactional queries. So that's where data warehousing was. Now, when Hadoop came along, Hadoop basically changed the game, and we went to we have object storage with just files, and then Hive quickly came along after that and figured out how do we run SQL queries over that. So the data lake is the rebranding that happened, I don't know, a few years ago, where it was data warehousing for Hadoop style data, which meant files in an object store with like somewhere describing how those files map to tables. Data fabric, I don't even I honestly, I don't even know on that one. Dataware, I've never heard that. Data mesh is what Trino has been doing since the beginning. So data mesh is more about, you have these siloed data stores all across the company. So you're, Facebook, and you have a bunch of these siloed data warehouses. You buy a bunch of companies, and you have silos for every company you buy, because they all have their own data warehouses. And you're like, I want to run a query. Like, we had this customer that was like, they manufacture things. They're like, I want to know how many masks I have at the beginning of the pandemic. And they own like 100 companies, each of which has different data warehouses. And so they literally had to send emails to every company and be like, do an accounting in your system. And it took them a month to figure out the answer. So with a data mesh, a data mesh is a way of approaching solving that problem. It makes solving the problem possible. Whereas before it was pretty much impossible. You'd have to use email. So data mesh allows you to connect them together. There are challenges beyond that, but it is a way that you can get to solving that really big distributed data problem that everyone has once they get to a certain size. It just happens.
Yeah, I think this is like a super thorough explanation about data warehouse lake and data mesh as well. I know for a fact where O'Reilly does provide a free book on data mesh by Zamac herself. So for those who kind of wish to go and download, it's for free available. I'll actually share a link of the book there, data mesh, so audience can actually get the book for free, if they kind of log in on this link I've shared, and can download and learn more about data mesh. And it's written by Zamac, so it's amazing.
Sponsored by Starburst.
Sponsored by Starburst, yeah. So a quick question here from Suzanne. I know she's, today she definitely wants the bunny. She's out there running for it, but she also has an interesting question for you. Dain, would you ever go back to Facebook or a similar company?
So I'm a founder in Starburst. So
yeah,
that's so no. I really, so the big companies like Facebook are really interesting depending on when you join. So as companies get older, their problems become more and more sliced up and narrowly focused. So back in 2012, when we joined Facebook, we got the problem of build a interactive SQL data warehouse from scratch. Nowadays, when people would join, they would get I'd like you to improve the performance of this part of Presto by 3% because that will save us a whole bunch of money, right?
Right.
So there are these really, really big problems, and when you're a big company, they have this scale that you don't see unless you work at a place like that. So it's a great place to work for a couple of years, and then they become really big, and now you have big company politics, which some people love. I personally do not.
That's very cool. So definitely you have a lot of work in terms of being a founder at Starburst now. So that makes a lot of sense. Also, since we are on this topic, I know for a fact recently it was announced that Andrew Rosa, the last of the top Presto contributors from Facebook, has joined Starburst now. So what does that mean for Trino and Starburst in terms of where you plan to take this project now? And that all your original contributors have moved to the enterprise side. How does that feel? I know for a fact you might be super happy to have like everyone in one place and then you can plan a lot of things, but would love to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm so happy. Andre is like one of my favorite people. He's just like great to work with. Yeah, so it's great having like it's great having kind of everyone back in one place working on it. The of the people are still involved. I mean, obviously there's people like Chris Berner, who's now, I don't know, he runs he runs technology at like OpenAI or something like that.
Nice.
Because he was one of the smartest guys around. So so it's great having everyone back together, and it gave us Andre showed up and he's like, I want to work on long running batch jobs. We're like, great. That was literally on my list of stuff I wanted to do, and I was too busy to do it. And it's like, great. And they've been working on this project Tardigrade, which you can follow on the Trino site, to be able to run kind of unbounded size queries on bounded size hardware. So it does this by dividing up jobs and being able to have buffers of the results between stages. So you don't have to have everything running, which sounds very much like a Hadoop Spark, but it's all done in a very Trino kind of style. And I won't go into detail because it's very, very technical. But the net of it is, so they have, it's checked into Trino. They have the first version of it, and you can run really, really large jobs, and they're working on it. And so we want to be able to, so this is something that Trino's always done. So like at Facebook, when we left Facebook 3 years ago, Trino was running more than half of all the batch workloads at Facebook, and I hear that it's gone up significantly from there. And that was possible because Facebook had large resources available. This project allows people with smaller installations to do really large queries. Obviously, they're going to take longer because, like, you can't run you don't have like 1,000 concurrent machines in a cluster to run all your jobs. So they don't take like 10 seconds; they might take hours. But it's really awesome. Like I love having those guys around. It's great.
Amazing. And also for a fact that, since I know, Dain, you kind of love video games, and Starburst does a lot of, gamified sort of things. And now I know that Starburst is also hosting a gamified sweepstakes called Space Quest League, and the next competition is also happening right now. So just for our audience who would be interested to take that up, test your data skills to enter, and you have a chance to win $20,000. Oh my. And that too in cash, which is so cool. I'll share the link with our folks here so they can actually join the league. So what's like the hack there? How can they win that? Dain? Any tips for them to win?
Sign up and try it out. No
Exactly.
spoilers.
Okay, no spoilers. Definitely. And that's amazing. Also, I know for a fact we've spoken about data mesh, about Trino, about the side about your early days at Facebook and how things have transitioned since then. But I would also like to hear more about your experience and your favorite examples of what interesting things customers at Starburst are doing, and that things customers are doing with Starburst and Trino, and at the same time what kind of impactful technology or business outcomes are they achieving out of it. Would love to hear that side as well.
Oh, that's a big question. So I'm actually like I'm constantly surprised at like the amazing things people do. So there's um, Trino and Starburst. So Starburst is very popular with the enterprise product with large corporations because they have very complex like security or regulatory needs, and so our version of Trino has like extensive security extensions to deal with those really difficult environments. And then once those corporations are, so that allows them to pull this system into their workflows, and then they're able to do things like big banks being able to do fraud detection at scales and speeds that just weren't possible with anything else they have. So it's popular as a way of like doing direct fraud detection, preparing data for machine learning processes, etc. It's used in again more banking, like regulatory, like search all the history of bond trading and see who was trying to cheat the markets, which is a massive data set. There's also companies building applications on top of it. So they're using Trino as a way of processing data in like the healthcare space and transportation, those sorts of spaces. So those are like traditional kind of big enterprise use cases. Recently, we built out our SaaS platform, Starburst Galaxy, which is a super easy to use system. Like you can go sign up right now at galaxy.starburst.io, and in a couple of minutes you'll have a system set up. You can run some queries, you can mount your data sets into it, and you're just going, right? And nice. It's a different approach than like we have customers where they're like, we have 11 LDAP systems that have to be integrated to actually do an authentication, right? This is I'm a normal sized company with normal sized problems. Obviously it's Trino, so we can scale up to really big usages, but it's a much simpler approach. And like when people ask me questions in the community, I just go and fire up the SaaS version, because I can just click a couple of buttons and like run some queries and figure something out, as opposed to like starting up a Docker environment or something else like that. So we're starting to kind of like provide, I don't know, they're like two different sides of like where people are using the system.
Okay, yeah. And also that that brings me to one another kind of follow-up question, which is more around the customers and data. Like, how do you solve problems of data compliance, governance for your customers? I'm sure like there are many places where data needs to stay in a particular country, like obviously with GDPR issues also kind of coming in. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, so the answer is it kind of depends. I know isn't that always the answer from someone who writes databases? Is it depends. So in general, with someone who's using the enterprise product where they're going to manage it themselves, it's easy for them to set it up, put it in a specific region, either in a cloud provider or in a private data center, and hook it up to their data sets. And there's extensive security systems and rules that you can configure to so physical controls around what region, that's easy. Just put it in a data center next to the data, and then it's in that region. But when it comes to like compliancy rules, Trino supports row level security, column level security, and depending on the exact solution you choose, it might be a role-based solution or an attribute-based solution. And then in the SaaS product, you can choose where your compute is actually running. So that's an easy way to deal with like making sure data doesn't transit if you don't want to. And there's security controls in there also. So it's the answer is a lot of policy.
Got it. Awesome. That's amazing. And I know for a fact where there are a lot of things when you talk about data governance, and I think policies kind of just adhering to them kind of makes a lot of sense. Also, it's almost time, Dain. Let's do the cool raffle. I know for a fact where there are so many people waiting for it. So let's see, and I'm sure you might actually find this fascinating as well, the cool raffle that we might do here. All right, we have good 15 entries. Let's see who the winner is. I have myself, entered the raffle, though I am not eligible for it. So if my name comes in, we'll draw again, and let's do this. Awesome. All the best for everyone who have participated here. All right, Bhumika Patil, congratulations. I am sure you'll be super happy with this, and you win the cool bunny. And I'm sure we'll be doing. I'll be, for those who have actually entered the raffle, we'll definitely come up with another cool raffle. Stay tuned for more things coming from Trino. We definitely have a lot of stuff coming in. I'm very thankful for Starburst being a partner of the Ravit Show. We've come a long way, and I'm definitely seeing Trino. I'm like super excited for the next month's Trino Summit, all the contests that Starburst is coming up with. So super happy for that. Also, one last question for you, Dain, before we wrap this up. If folks want to reach out to you and learn more about Trino, about the new features, and about the new things that that will be happening, or if they want to be updated with Trino, what's the best place?
The best place is go to the Trino website, and from there you can find our Slack. Nice. I'm on the Slack pretty much all the time. I can be reached there. There's also a podcast that is done around Trino, or a video broadcast of that you can catch up on things. We have announcements, etc. So you can find all of that off the website.
Awesome. And I know Brian does a lot of stuff. He's on paternal leave. So definitely, I do watch the Trino episodes. They're fantastic. For those who wish to actually check them out, you can, I've shared the link in the chat, and you can go to trino.io and learn more about it. But once again, congratulations, Bhumika Patil for winning the cool bunny. And for others who have participated, we'll be doing a lot more raffles, a lot more things around it. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Check out galaxy.starburst.io. You can sign up. We'll give you 500 in credits. It's what I've been working on for the past year with David and a pretty big team. I'm super excited about it. I think it's amazing, and I think you'll think it's amazing. Also, we're hiring, so go check out the Starburst website.
Awesome. I definitely a great place to work at Starburst Trino, and a lot of opportunities. I'll be definitely be updating for the folks who are wanting to, join in. And there's obviously the career page you can visit. But thank you once again, Dain. I can't wait to have like a 2.0 version, maybe very soon.
Yeah.
And this was amazing. Thanks for all the insights that you've shared, and also to our audience, thank you very much for joining us today. To many more Raffles, to many more Commander Bun Bun. Yeah, looking forward.
Thank you. This has been great.